What's up, traders? Today we're setting up indicators inside of thinkorswim. We'll walk through 5 specific examples for the sake of today's video, but I do promise once you understand these 5, you shouldn't have too many issues setting up almost anything else inside of the platform when it comes to studies. If you do run into issues though, let me know down below in the comments section and I will do my best to help troubleshoot anything that comes up. Whenever we're thinking about indicators, or studies as they're called here in thinkorswim, we want to associate that with the beaker icon that shows up twice in the top blue bar. It also shows up a third time in the platform. If you right-click somewhere on a chart window, all the way down at the bottom of the pop-up, we get the studies menu here as well. Now take a quick mental snapshot of what we have in this box in the menu, because it's the same exact thing that we can achieve by clicking in the top blue bar on the option towards the right. So again, mental snapshot, and in 1, 2, 3, we'll click up here and see that we have the same exact options. So let's walk through these now, and then we'll get into those 5 studies that we'll set up. So up first, we have quick study and add study. And if we take a look what's in these pop-out menus, they seem identical. So we have all studies, which is going to alphabetize everything, and then we have them broken into categories or just different themes, right? And the same thing holds true for add study. It's identical. But the implementation of the 2 different options is slightly different. So if I use quick study, go to all studies, we'll load the ADX, which is just the first one on the list. What you'll notice is that it does load the study. That's fantastic. But if we want to add a second study and we try using that same option, the quick study option, and go to all studies, let's try B this time. And I don't know, let's grab the Bollinger Bands. That's a common one. Notice what's happened here. The ADX is no longer with us, and we only have the Bollinger Bands. So whenever you're using the quick study option, it's only going to load one indicator at a time, and whatever you choose is going to be that indicator. If you want more than one, you need to go to add study and use this one. So notice now, if I choose ADX, we have both existing on the same chart at the same time. And just to illustrate it once again, if I go to studies, quick study, let's try the RSI this time. So we'll go to Rs, I believe it's this one. Yep, there's your RSI. What do you think will happen when I click this? And remember, we're using quick study, not add study. So when I click, it should be the only one on the chart, right? So here we go, 1, 2, 3. It's the only one left on the chart, exactly as we expected. So that's the subtle difference between those 2 drop downs there. Underneath that, we have the edit studies option. And when I click here, we get a pop-up window to literally edit studies and strategies. And we're going to spend some time in here as we get into those 5 indicators that we'll set up today. But for now, let's round out our drop-down menu. Before we get back into it, I would just point out that this beaker option right here is going to be a direct shortcut to that window, edit studies and strategies. This is going to be something that we use repeatedly in today's video. So let's cancel that and finish up our drop down here. Remove all studies, fairly self-explanatory. It's going to ask a little confirmation. If you choose yes, it'll remove everything. Underneath that, what else do we have? Reset to factory default. Let's illustrate how that works quickly. I'll add the ADX. And notice down below, by default, it's just a red line. Let's change this and set a new default. So I'll just quickly go to edit. And again, don't worry, we will discuss all these customization features as the video goes on. But to illustrate how this reset works, I'm going to change this to a histogram and the color to blue. I'll press apply. You can see that change take effect down below. And now I will save this as default by clicking on this little option here. Now I'll press OK. And if we go back into our studies dropdown, you can see reset to factory default, we have the ADX. So if I want to reset this back to the red line, fairly simple, right? I would just click on this option. So let me show you that it truly has taken. So we'll remove all studies. And what we'll do is we'll come in, we'll go to quick study, all studies, we'll load the ADX. And again, we do get that blue histogram because we set that as the new default. If we go and reset this now, so we'll reset the ADX. We'll come back in, we'll go to quick study, all studies, and because we're using the quick study option, it should overwrite what's currently on the chart, correct? So when I click here, we'll get the red line. That's what should happen, right? So here we go, and there's your red line. So that's reset to factory default. What's up after that? We have study sets, okay? So save, load, and delete study sets. Now a set's traditionally more than one thing, so let's add a study. We'll go ahead and put the Bollinger Bands back into place. We'll add those here. So we have 2 things on the chart. That's great. We'll come down and we'll go to Save Study Set. We'll give this a name. Let's call it Test, just for the sake of today's video. I'll press Save. And now, instead of having to load each of these one at a time, I can come into, I just removed, right? I can come into Studies. I can go to Load Study Set. I can choose Test. And just like that, we have both of our indicators loaded at the same time. An important little piece of information here is, let's say that we want to change this to the blue histogram. So we'll do that by doing this. There's your blue histogram. And we'll press apply. That change has now taken effect. I am not going to save this as default. I'll just press OK. But what I'll do instead is I will save the study set again. I'll overwrite test. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. And now what will happen, so let's remove this, is when I load the study set, it's going to remember how I've saved it. Okay, so although I did not set it to the default, it's being saved as the style for this set. And when I load test now, instead of being that red line, we have the blue histogram. So whatever styles your studies are when you save a study set, the study set will remember whatever styles you've set. And obviously delete is pretty self-explanatory. You can just delete the test and I'll press OK. And now it no longer shows up in our list of options to load as a set. I'll remove all the studies. And now going forward into the second half of the video to set up these 5 indicators, we're going to focus on this beaker icon right here. So let's do that now. So as we know, clicking on the little beaker icon here will bring up the Edit Studies and Strategies window. And this is really our home base for setting up all of our indicators, right? This is where all the customization and the fun stuff happens. So let's explain it briefly. On the left-hand side, we have a box with all of our studies in thinkorswim, and the options are nearly endless here. I can just continue to scroll and it feels never ending. So something I would point out about this is that if you don't want to manually put yourself through the trouble of finding what you're looking for, just use the search function. You can click up here and you can type in whatever indicator you're looking for. It's really handy. Before we start loading things and getting into the 5 that we'll discuss today, I want to quickly talk about the right-hand side. We have a slot for our price indicators, volume indicators, and lower indicators. Currently, because there's nothing applied to the chart in the background, each of them are empty. So pretty self-explanatory, but this is the home base. Remember, you can see everything that you have applied in this screen right here, and you can start customizing from this screen as well. So the first one we're going to cover today is the simple period moving average. I'm just going to type in simple, and again, that search function's fantastic. It's going to prevent some scrolling. There's 2 ways I can add this to the chart. I can either add selected, and it will come over here now, or I can just double click and we get another instance. I don't want to, so what I'll just do is click on the little X to remove one. Now we're just left with this, and how do we customize it, right? There's 2 ways to do this as well. There's usually 2 ways to do everything in thinkorswim. The first one is to double click, and now we get the customization pop-up window. The second one would be to click on the little gear icon here towards the right. Just like that, we get the same customization pop-up window. Let's walk through it now. On the top, you're usually going to have all of your inputs, so the values that the indicator is taking in, not necessarily the style. The style is what we get down below, right? This is where you customize the style, the look and feel of the indicator itself. So up above, for moving averages at least, traditionally you can change the metric of price that you're looking at. I would always recommend the close. Usually the default options are the best options here. But the length, obviously that's something we can change. A very popular moving average is the 20 SMA, right? So we'll put 20 in for length. We do not want to add any displacement, which is the equivalent of offset. We don't want to deal with that. And then underneath, something thinkorswim has included here are breakout signals. Now by default, it's set to no, and I would encourage you to leave them off because we don't want to rely on these signals. They're pretty faulty. We just want to use the moving average for what it is. So we're going to leave that to no, but we'll describe what they are in just a moment. Underneath, for the plots, this is where the fun stuff comes in, right? And we can get to customizing. So draw as. Do you want it to be a line? Do you want it to be a histogram? Do you want it to be dots, squares, triangles, dashed lines? I mean, you name it, you can pretty much do it here in thinkorswim. Before we get into it, let me just show you what it looks like on the chart. So the only change that we've made so far is changing it to a 20 SMA from a 9 SMA, which was the default. I'm going to press apply, not OK, but apply. And what you'll notice is in the background, we have that blue line on our chart now, and that is the 20 SMA. You'll also notice a couple of other things. This over here is considered the bubble, and this is considered the title up at the top. If we click back into the indicator customization, you'll notice down below, we have the plot. That's the moving average itself, by the way. But the bubble, which we just pointed out, is this information right here. And the title is what we have up here for simple period moving average. That's what those three things are. Sometimes I turn off the bubble if I don't want it to distract me. Other times I'll leave it on. It's a personal preference thing. The same exists up here at the top. Input names are going to show you price. So instead of it just saying close here, you can see that right there, right? It will say price, closed. Instead of it just saying 20, it will say length, 20, excuse me. So I can just show you that, right? If I click on show input names, okay, apply, you can see price, close, length, 20, so on and so forth. So that's all that means. Generally, a little bit too distracting. It takes up a lot of screen space up there. We'll turn that off. Plot names, it's going to show you the plot name of the moving average, and then the left axis obviously turns on, a price axis on the left. I find that to be fairly distracting, but that's how you would do it. In terms of the customization now, let's show you what this looks like, right? So let's change this to a dotted line. Let's go with the width of 3, and let's change the color to a yellowish orange. We're going to go ahead and turn that on, and we'll actually turn the bubble off. So pay attention to this right here. It's going to disappear when we turn the bubble off, okay? So we'll press OK, and we'll press apply. And now in the background, you can see we have dots. The width is slightly increased, and the bubble no longer exists here on the right. And we also turned off the labels for our title up here at the top. So that's the basics of how the customization really works. I'm going to go ahead and turn this back into a line. I'm going to change the width back to 2 is fine, and we'll just make it a dashed level. We'll go ahead and put the bubble back on, and what we'll do from here is we'll just save this as a default. And we walked through the same thing with the ADX earlier, but if I save this as a default and press OK, now when we go to add a new instance of the simple moving average, what it'll be is the same exact thing as what we have. And I'll just press apply so we can see that change take effect. All we'll do is add the same exact thing. Notice that if I click into it, we have the 20, we have it as a line, it's a dashed line, the width is 2, the color is orange. To illustrate, the only change we'll make is we'll turn this into a 50 SMA. We'll go ahead and press OK. And now again, you can see the difference here, 20 and 50. The style other than that will be the exact same. I'll press apply, and now we have both of those lines on our chart. So those are moving averages in a nutshell. The same exact thing holds true. Let's go ahead and remove the 50 here, and we'll just set it up as an exponential. So I'll type in EXP, there we go, exponential moving average right here. We'll add selected, we'll click in, we'll go ahead and change this one to the 50. We'll keep the color as blue so we can see the difference and make note of the difference. We'll change it to, I don't know, let's go with triangles, and let's make the width really wide at 5, and let's turn the bubble off, okay? So we'll press OK, apply, and just like that, I'll click out of this now. You can see we have our triangles as the 50 EMA, and there's no blue bubble on the right-hand price axis. So that's setting up moving averages in a nutshell. You can also edit these once again by right-clicking, edit, and now we're just in the edit window. We're not necessarily in the master list of all of our indicators, which we can achieve by clicking on the beaker up here. Let's continue along and talk about Bollinger Bands. So BOL should bring it right up. There we go. We will add the selected. We will double click to start editing. Notice that there are some different inputs this time around. So we have deviations on Bollinger Bands. So let's first just apply this so we can see them. So here we go. I'm going to remove the 20 SMA because that's the same thing as the midpoint of the Bollinger Band. So I will remove that. And the blue triangles are quite distracting, to be quite honest with you. So we'll just change this back to a line, and we'll change the width to a 2. That's fine. Okay, apply. That's much better. But I don't want 2 blue lines. So let's go into the Bollinger Bands and instead change this back to what our orange 20 SMA was. So the midline is based on the length here, which is a 20 simple period moving average. You can see the average here is set to simple. So let's change that to what we had earlier. I'm going to make it a dashed line under style. We'll go here. We'll change the color to that orange color, and we'll keep the bubble on. I'm going to go ahead and press OK and apply, and just like that, you can see the midline of our Bollinger Bands is now the orange dashed line. Let's say we want to change the upper and lower bands. We can click in, we can come to the lower band, and we can change the color, right? Let's say that we want to make that blue, and then we can make the upper band blue as well. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change that. Sorry for so many changes, but we're going to make it white, and we're going to make the lower band white as well because I don't want it to conflict with the 50 EMA that we have on the chart, okay? So those two things are now white, and if I press OK and apply, you can see the upper band is white, the lower band is white, and the bubble themselves are also white. The bubble for the midpoint of the Bollinger Bands, aka the 20 SMA, is orange as we had set it in terms of color. In the top little title section, you can see that we're going based on the close. We're looking at the 20 simple period moving average as the midpoint, and we have -2 as the first deviation and +2 as the second deviation. Let's go into this and change those deviations. That's these settings right here. You can change them to whatever you'd like. Let's say you want something a little bit wider. You can go to a 2.5, both negative and positive, and that will widen them up just a little bit. So if I press OK and apply, notice how they jumped just a little bit. So that's your Bollinger Bands in a nutshell. Let's continue along and add some lower studies here. So we're going to add the MACD. That's a popular one, right? MACD shows right up. We're going to add selected. And before we dive into the settings, let me press apply so we can now see it down below. This is the default configuration. Let's jump into it and start talking about what each of these pieces are. If we double click, oops, there we go. We're into the settings here. The fast length is the length of the moving, essentially it's calculating the difference between the fast and slow moving averages on the chart, right? So the fast length, again, usually you leave these as default. If you start messing with these, you're not going to be looking at the same MACDs as everyone else. The self-fulfilling prophecy, it won't really work out. So I wouldn't recommend you change those, but that's where you would do it, I suppose. The MACD length is the one that, you might have a little bit more leeway with, and that's, you can change that from 9. Again, that's the default. I wouldn't really advise that you change it. Same thing with your average type. If you wanted to drop it down to a simple moving average, you could do that. And then we'll go back to exponential. Breakout signals, let me illustrate this because we didn't talk about it with the moving averages. We'll turn those on, okay? And what we're gonna do is clean up this indicator down below. I personally am not a huge fan of the histogram, and the histogram is known as the difference, okay? So where it says show plot, I want to hide that. I don't want us to show that plot here. So I'm going to uncheck this, and not by default, but by doing that, it's no longer going to show this confusing histogram. I don't want that to show up on my charts, so we'll press OK, we'll press apply, and just like that, the histogram is gone. But notice in its place, we now have these arrows, which are essentially the breakout points, right? That's what we opted to show right here. Show breakout signals, yes. So whenever the indicator believes that there's some sort of signal, we'll print a down arrow for a short signal and an up arrow for a long signal. Again, I wouldn't recommend that you use these as end-all be-all signals, but that's how they work, okay? So I'm gonna turn them back off because I personally don't believe in them or look at them. And then we'll start changing some colors as well, right? So let's change the MACD from being blue to orange. That's a personal favorite color of mine in the platform. The average, so the moving average that's associated with this, let's change that from the ugly sort of pale to, I don't know, let's change that to, let's go with a blue, like a deeper blue. So here in more colors, we can choose this. That may or may not show up on your screen, but I'm liking that color here. The difference, we turn that off. That was the histogram. The 0 line is currently set to pink. That's fine. And then your up signal colors are here as well. So if you wanted to change your arrows to just be all neutral and gray, you could do that, and you could just rely on the actual direction. Notice that this change will not take place because I turned our signals to no, okay? So let's press OK, see those changes take effect. So now we have a blue MACD, an orange MACD with a blue moving average coinciding, and the purple 0 line, no histogram, there we go, and no breakout signals as well. Just like with our upper indicators here, you can see the explanation bar right here. So the MACD, our fast is 12, the slow is 26. We're looking at the 9, it's set to exponential, and the breakout signals are not showing, okay? So that's the breakdown of the MACD. The next more popular lower study would be the RSI, there we go. We'll choose the RSI, add selected. We'll click the gear icon just to illustrate this different method. So your length, your overbought, oversold. Again, your inputs are all in this top box. All of your customization in terms of look and feel are in the bottom section. So let's click OK. Let's apply this first so we can see it on the chart. So there it is down towards the bottom. Let's double click. Let's start messing with this just a little bit. What we're going to do is set the overbought slightly lower, so to 60. And we're going to set the oversold to something slightly higher, like 40. We're still going to use the close price. We're still going to use this as the average type. We're not going to show breakout signals. But what you'll notice, so look right here, is that this is currently 70, this is currently 80. We've adjusted both of those things. If I press OK and then apply, you'll notice that it's now been compressed to 60 and 40. Pretty simple, straightforward stuff, but this is how all of your customization takes place. I also want to illustrate that this can be drawn as a histogram. And what we'll do, because it'll make it really, really obvious when we're overbought and oversold, the whole histogram will change color. So let me show you that. I'll press apply. Notice when the histogram here is completely red when we're overbought, and it's completely blue when we're oversold. And again, you can change all of these colors. You can basically customize this to your heart's content. Let's make that a little bit darker for the normal. Let's change the overbought to a deeper red. Oops, we want to go, let's change it to a really nasty red, right? So a pure red, there we go. And the oversold, because that may be a long signal, right? We'll change it to green. We'll press OK, apply, and you can see those changes take effect down at the bottom. So those are 4 of the big ones that most people use. And the next one that we're going to cover is the VWAP for our volume weighted average price, okay? And this is really an indicator that's reserved for intraday. So before we get down to the smaller time frames, I want to save this as a set and show you that here on the platform, okay? So instead of going to studies, doing the drop-down thing, you can see right here, we have the ability to save this as a set. If I do that, we get the same pop-up. I will once again call this test. I'm not advocating that this is a good setup. This is just for example's sake, right? So we'll save that as test. I'll press save. And now what we'll do is we'll remove all. I'm going to press apply. And now notice that everything has now been removed. To easily access that from this window, all we have to do is go to sets in the upper tab here. So when I click that and I click into test, oops, we want to drop that down. There we go. I can now see that it's the exponential moving average, it's the Bollinger Bands, the MACD, and the RSI. If I want to use that set, all I have to do is literally click on Use Set right here. So I click Use Set, and just like that, I'll press Apply. All of those changes are back on the chart. Okay, so that's the beauty of working with sets. When you're working with sets, you can easily come in and you can remove things, right? So now I'm going to get rid of the RSI and the exponential moving average. I'll press Apply. You can see that take effect. It's as simple as that, right? So this is really the home base for setting up all of our studies and indicators in Thinkorswim. Let's remove everything. And now I want to talk about VWAP on an intraday time frame. So we'll drop it down to something like a 30-minute. No, actually, let's go even smaller. Let's go with something like a 5-minute. That'll give us a good starting point. Let's go back into our beaker. Let's search up the VWAP for VWAP. We'll go ahead and add the selected. And we want to jump into the settings here. So let's actually, as we've been doing, I'll apply it first so we can see that change take effect. I want to walk through it, right? Because this is a popular one and some people kind of get frustrated with how it's set up out of the box. So you can clearly see that we have a lower deviation. The VWAP itself is kind of in the middle, and we have an upper deviation very similar to the Bollinger Bands. But this can get a little bit ugly, right? So let's go ahead and fix this up just a little bit. We'll come into the VWAP settings. And what we want to do is just start playing with some of the things that we've learned about so far. We don't want to show the upper band, so we'll turn show plot off. We don't want to show the lower band, so we'll turn show plot off as well here. We'll go back to the VWAP and let me illustrate the issue first, and then we'll talk about the fix. So I'll press apply, and notice that now we just have the naked VWAP. And usually that's what most people are using, right? You just want to know what the actual value is of the volume weighted average price for the day. You're not necessarily concerned with the upper and lower deviations. If we click back in though, a common issue is that many people don't like the fact that this is just one continuous line and you get these big drops when the day actually changes. So to fix that, there's one little workaround that I've found where you can come in and you can draw this as dots or squares, whatever your heart's content. And then if we press OK and apply, notice now, you're not going to get the connection from here to here. And you can clearly see where the day actually starts and where the day actually ends. So that's a useful little tip there. In terms of using the VWAPs as bands, right? Some people are like, well, I want to load the 2, 3, and maybe 4 standard deviations as well on the VWAP. And that's totally reasonable if you have some sort of strategy that looks for overextensions one way or another. This is how you would set it up, okay? So we're going to turn these upper bands back on, lower bands back on. We're going to change the color to something muted like a gray, change the upper to a gray as well. We're going to turn the VWAP into a orange. As I pointed out, that's a favorite color of mine. And what we're going to do before we continue along is just save this as default. Okay, so I'm going to save as default. We're going to press OK, and we'll apply that. And you can clearly see now in the background, we have our dot for the VWAP, and we have the upper band and we have the lower band in gray. Now, what we can do to make multiple bands is just search up the indicator again, VWAP, and when we add it, it's going to be set to the same exact thing. We're going to have the gray upper band and the gray lower band with the orange dot as the midpoint. So when we double click on this one, what we're going to do is change the deviation. So we'll go with a -3 and we'll go with a +3. And now what we can do is, the VWAP plot itself will be the exact same. It will be overlapping. It's not going to be a difference, but you can turn it off if you wanted to, right? So we'll try that. We'll apply. And now you can see we have both of those bands, the 2 and the 3, the -2 and the -3. You could even come in and you could add it again. And this time, let's change this to -1. And then we'll change this one to +1. And now we'll turn show plot off and we'll go to OK. And we'll go to OK, and now we have our 3 standard deviations of VWAP, section 1, 2, and 3, and it's all using the same midpoint or the VWAP value itself. So that's a quick in and out of how you set up a majority of indicators here inside of thinkorswim. It's fairly self-explanatory once you really get familiar with the beaker options here and some of the settings that we have. Now, here's something useful as well. This is a quick tip that I figured I'd throw in here at the end for all of you people who decided to stick around until the very end of the video. So whenever you create a set, you can actually use one of these sets as something in your toolbar, right? And by toolbar, I mean this. If we come into the settings and we go here to My Tools and turn this to On Each Chart, we'll press OK. You'll notice up at the top, we have our little pinned bar. We want to click on the gear in the top right-hand corner as that hovers. There we go. When we click here, let's add a button, okay? We're going to add a study set. So let's add the test that we just made for this video as a study set. And if I click done, now let's go back out to a daily. And as this loads, we'll give it a second there. Let's remove everything first. So the VWAP, notice how on the daily, it looks fairly ugly, right? There's not a whole lot of use there. So we're gonna remove that from the daily. And instead, what we'll do is we'll hover our cursor for the toolbar. We'll load the study set test by just clicking right here. And just like that, we have everything that we saved into that study set with all of the settings that we had preloaded. So we've got the Bollinger Bands with the 20 SMA, orange dashed line, the upper and lower bands in gray. We have the 50 EMA in blue. We have the MACD in blue and orange, and the RSI in green histogram and red histogram. So that's a quick tip. Again, toolbar can be accessed by the settings icon, the gear. Turn My Tools to On Each Chart. You can press OK. As you hover in the toolbar itself, you can click on the little gear icon, which keeps disappearing, but is right here. There we go. When you click on this, you can edit your buttons. So we'll add one more just for an example. We'll go to Study Set. I'll show you what my options selling indicator set looks like. I'll press Done. And instead of using now Test, we'll go to Options Selling. So if I click this, notice this is the Options Selling indicator set. And if we scrunch the chart up, you can see down below we've got IV rank and we have Bollinger Bands and the options probability of expiring cone in a very dark gray. I'm personally someone who does not like to be distracted by a ton of indicators, so I like things that are fairly subtle. I'll show you one more set of mine. If I come in here, load study set, the 20, 50, and 200 simple period moving averages. A very, very simple setup, 20 SMA in gray, 50 SMA in blue, and 200 SMA in green. And once again, if I wanted to, I could come into here. I could change this from option selling. We can change the action to be the 20, 50, 200. And we'll also make one more button. This is something useful as well. You can save a study set called No Studies. And if you add that and use it, it'll take all your studies away. So instead of removing all from this menu here, you can just create a button that says No Studies. Here's your 2050. Here's your test. Here's your No Studies, right? So that's a cool little shortcut that you can use. And again, if you stuck with me towards the end of the video, hopefully that was worth it, just that little extra tip and trick. So that's gonna wrap it up. If you enjoyed today's tutorial, let me know down below in the comment section. If you thought I missed something or you need help with one of your indicators, let me know down below there as well. With all of that being said, I wish you happy trading and check out the rest of the channel for more tutorials.